welcome to the replay viewers. I'm back today with another amazing guest who I've had a really awesome time getting to know in the past. Actually, I think started getting to know Wil at the end of last year, like I think in the last few days of last year. We actually connected on first connected over a musical artist, and it just kind of budded from there, which is so cool. How art can bring us together.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, as you can see by the theme today, today the theme is if you know it's time to be your full slash true self. And what I mean by that is if you have any degree of self awareness, I would imagine that you know the parts of you that you may still hide because maybe you think they're not good enough. Maybe you fear you'll be judged. Maybe you just have insecurities about these parts of yourself because you learned how to judge them. Whatever it may be, I feel that, again, if you have even a slight degree of self-awareness, you probably know the parts of you that you're still hiding or, sweeping under the carpet, putting in a drawer in a closet. And so today we're just going to be speaking about what we've learned about the effect that can have when we hold back on ourselves in that way, energetically, emotionally, and then also what we've found just about like finding the courage just to like this is who I am. So that's the idea. Again, I'm joined by Wil Fisher today. Thank you for being with me, Wil. And yeah, feel free to share some words just about, who you are, what you bring to the world, anything that feels good in this moment.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me. I feel a lot of warmth and joy in my heart in this moment, and feeling very smiley just to be with you and to be in your energy and to be with your people.
Oh,
And I also love this theme, and it very much connects with my work in the world. So my practice is called Willfully Living, which is a play of on my name, right? So will and willful, those things are, will is within willful. And when we think about willful, it's often very intentional. It's like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm deciding that this is who I want to be and how I want to show up and what I want to create in the world. But then there's also the part of it that is fully living, right? And for me, what that is expressing is fully being ourselves, fully owning our truth and showing up as the fullest expression of that truth. And in many ways, that is like our lives journey, right? Our lives work is to clarify this essence of who we are and find the courage to express all of that. And so I do that work within my coaching practice. I do that work within retreats. So I offer one-on-one retreats, and then I offer group retreats. And then I do quite a bit of healing and spiritual work as well. That is all serving folks to clear out the parts of them that are not them and get a better look at who they actually are, and then find the courage to express that. So yeah, I love this theme.
amazing, amazing. Couldn't have worked out better if you asked me. And I just looked at the timer and it said 3:33. As I was like reflecting on what you just said, which is my favorite number,
That's
3:33.
mine too. That's my favorite angel
Oh,
number too.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun.
I'm
I just thought about that yesterday. I was at a breath work thing, and they had it was like army numbers, right? So
mm,
it was 130. It was like 133, but with that it was 1333. And I was
okay.
like, oh look, 333s. And I was like, oh wow, every time it's 133, I can also see it as 1333.
Oh,
um
yeah.
and it just had this moment of like, yeah, 333 really is the one that I feel most connected to and probably see the most as well.
That's probably why it caught my eye for me to reflect on it because it's just like,
Mhm.
that synchronicity, that lining up. And then just real quick, I just want to say hi to Roots. Thanks for being with us here live. Roots left a comment saying, "Yay!" I think he meant to say two of my favorite beings.
Yay, I love Roots too. Roots and I were just in
Yeah.
dialogue around a self-love post I made.
Oh,
Sweet.
good.
Sweet to have Roots here.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah. Yeah. It's fun just to because I didn't know that you knew Roots, and then there's another friend I didn't know that but it's like all of us who are really like intent about this healing work, it's like we're all just like 1 degree, like even though we don't sometimes know each other, like, oh, but you know so and so.
For sure. And the longer and farther we go on the path, this smaller, or perhaps it becomes more expanded, but it feels smaller because we get to know each other and see each
Yeah,
other also walking the same path and
yeah,
supporting each other on the path too, right? We all have so much
yeah,
to teach each other and learn from each other. And it's so helpful to have like-minded, like-hearted people who are committed to this kind of thing.
yeah. No, I agree. I agree. Roots said, "Weaving the roots."
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing just about you and your mission. You know, your calling, your purpose. Thank you. It was really nice to hear that in your own words. And just if you're watching, you know, the replay, or if you're watching live, in the description, I have links for both Will and I. If you just want to know more, after hearing what we have to say, that's available. If that speaks to you, there's resources, I guess I'll say. So yeah, having mentioned that, yeah, let's dive in. So I'll say for me that just in my experience, and then I'll let you kind of like reflect. So in the work that I do, which is I'm a lot of what I do is channeling my own like soul essence, and we're all doing that in one way or the other. Uh, just because everything, if you ask me, like every expression of everything is coming from consciousness or 1 degree of consciousness or another, like even anger, like that's like we're summoning the energy of anger, like that's coming from somewhere. uh, and when I channel like my soul essence, like to me it's like that's more of my full self, like the self that wants to be loving and kind and peaceful, and see everything as the same thing, and get along and take care of each other, all those things. So that's more of like my soul essence that I refer to when I channel. And I'll say for me, like I've been getting stronger memos, like in my field, it's been like, yeah, like it's the only reason some of these things are still feel hard in your life is because you're still holding back on you. Like you're still hiding parts of yourself. And,
Mm,
it's like, and I know these things aren't just for me, and that's why like I share them as I feel inspired. But it was just like any walls you still feel like you're hitting, it's
mm,
because you're like still trying to hide certain parts of yourself.
mhm,
And I was just like, and I know when the memos come through, I'm just like, yeah, I can't really refute that.
mm.
uh, so I'm curious, have you seen that in your life, just where you were, whether it's now or before, or whenever it was, that where you just been hitting walls and just became clear, like, this wall is because I'm holding back on me. Does that relate to you at all?
Absolutely. I mean, ultimately, the truth of who we are is so big and powerful and beautiful and epic. And even those of us who are really committed to moving more and more towards that and expressing that, most of us are really far from the ultimate epicness of what that is, right? And so anytime we are hitting walls, we are not finding that alignment towards the truth of who we are. And so I certainly have made a lot of progress since beginning this path, but I know that there's so much further for me to go. You mentioned at the top that there is often an awareness of the parts of ourselves that we are hiding for those of us who are self aware. I'd say that has become trickier and trickier for me the longer and further I'm on this path. It's just so much more nuanced, and it's harder for me to see and bring to consciousness that which I am still hiding. And I know there is still stuff, and I know there are still shadows that get in the way of that stuff. And it can be tricky to find. Um, yeah. And a lot of times with my clients, the work is like figuring out how to like rattle them to find those things, like to see where they are triggered in a negative way, like where they're getting like where they're feeling like, resistance, and also where they're getting triggered in like a this part of me wants to come out piece too, like
Mm,
where the sort of like inspiration trigger is coming in and inviting some aspect of them that has been so repressed and so hidden that they aren't conscious that it's there, that they have forgotten about that piece of them.
mm. Gotcha. Gotcha. You know, I can definitely relate on the nuance thing. Yeah, just yeah, that definitely resonates. I'll say for me, the one thing that actually does help me in great in great detail is just seeing how things are being mirrored back to me and like the close relationships in my life.
Mhm.
Even just like there was a friendship that came in like 3 weeks ago, kind of out of the blue, and as I was getting to know this person, like I was just able to see like direct reflections. I was like, oh, I know exactly why we're talking right now because like you
Mhm.
are helping me see myself in new ways and like very vivid ways. And so with that, I like to throw in just to be wary of self judgment because
Mhm.
what I've learned is that, you know, we can create by preference, you know, in this, you know, human earth experience, we can create by preference, like just finding out what we prefer and don't prefer. And as I
Mhm.
become more clear on what I do prefer, one of the things that was happening is, you know, these aspects were being mirrored back to me of where I was, I just was still kind of playing into things that I don't prefer, if that makes sense. It's like, okay, well, here's what you've said you prefer, and then here's these mirrors that are showing you how you're still kind of buying into that which you don't prefer.
Mhm.
And so it was very helpful to see that, and then just based on my history with myself, because I can have really high standards, you know? It was
Mhm.
just like, okay, I'm seeing this, and I'm gonna be very careful not to like go into judgment and just be like, oh my gosh, like, you know, why are you still doing this? Why are you still
Mhm.
believing these things? And so I really had to be, you know, walk that line of like, I see things more clearly, and I'm, you know, I'm gonna choose compassion over judgment because
Mhm.
you know, if judgment is chosen, it's like that's like a slippery slope.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we think back to this idea of these parts of ourselves that are hiding, I think that judgment is only going to make them hide more and hide better and hide longer. And so the path is really towards acceptance. It's accepting all the parts of ourselves. And it doesn't mean that we need to keep these parts of ourselves if we are also assessing what how we want to show up and how we're currently showing up and looking at the difference. We can also make conscious choices to change these pieces that want to be released to get closer to the truth of who we are, right? But that doesn't happen by judging them. It happens by accepting that that's who we are and then making new choices. And it's like we have to start with acceptance, because without it, we aren't able to be in the full truth,
Yeah,
right? Like going back to this piece that it causes more hiding, more shadow to appear.
yeah,
And so, yeah, the judgment piece is like the antithesis. It's like in direct conflict with us really connecting with the truth.
yeah. No, I totally agree. And one of the ways that's phrased just in like metaphysics or like the language of energy is like
Mhm.
anything you resist or you judge, you actually give weight to it, you
Yep.
know? So, like, the second you make it wrong, call it a problem,
Mhm.
um, something that needs to be fixed, like you resist it, like you're actually adding weight to the situation
Mhm.
rather than the acceptance, which I like that you were talking about. To me, the acceptance is more of like a neutral energy. It's just like, it's
Yeah.
like I see, you know, it's like I see.
Yeah.
And again, I love that you spoke to like when we see again, that to me is where the preference come in. Like, okay, I'm seeing clearly, and you know, I can love what's here already, you know, because clearly
Mhm.
it's there for a reason. It's, you know, if it's there to me, it's served in some way or capacity because it's all Root says what you resist persists. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's
Mhm.
another way of saying it.
Mhm.
What you resist persists. Uh, and so yeah, it's like to me the neutrality is okay. I see, and it is the way it is for a reason, because I also feel that we're just exploring lots of potentials and possibilities in this life, and sometimes
Mm,
we don't even really. I'll speak for me, like, and I feel like I hear other people saying this type of thing. We don't really know more of what we want until we've kind of explored some avenues of what we don't want. And
mhm,
then all of a sudden we're like more clear. It's like, okay, I kind of see what that was like and that was like. And now I'm more clear about what I would prefer. And so that's why I'm just coming from the angle. Like, if it's here, it must have served in some way.
mhm.
And then from that neutrality, it's like, okay, well, what would I prefer from here? And, how can I gently, kindly, lovingly begin to like move in that direction? That's kind of what I was
Yeah,
picking.
that's so fun. I often think about in relationships or in jobs, that we have to go through the ones that don't work because it helps us clarify what we actually want in a partner or in a job. But I love applying that framework to our way of being, to who we are. Like, we have to go through trying to be certain ways or experimenting with being certain ways to realize that that's not our truth, right? It's like figuring out what is not me, what is not the expression of the core energy of will, like really allowing ourselves to be in that exploration to discover what is not aligned and to be okay with the missteps that happen when the alignment isn't reached. And acceptance is what supports us to be in that process with compassion, with grace, with love. The other thing that this conversation brought up for me is a thing I was reading in A Course in Miracles today, which was around laying our grievances down, which is also, to theme with acceptance. And the idea of it was to lay our grievances down because the grievances get in the way of salvation, of God's plan for salvation. And it's a similar idea in that when we are trying to judge, we are deciding that we know best instead of just accepting or laying our grievances down and allowing what is to be, knowing that there is a divine orchestration happening. And so it's, in a sense, it's a removing judgment and choosing acceptance, or laying down grievance and choosing acceptance of what is now, what is true, is surrendering to the divine orchestration, is allowing for that divine orchestration, that plan to play out instead of trying to micromanage it. Does that resonate? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, I'm just like breathing that one in for a second. Well, yeah, to me, because what I'm getting from that is like the whole resistance thing. And so, however, whoever's watching, however you look at it, whether you see it as like, God's plan or source energy or your higher self or your soul, whatever you feel is like, your connection to that, something bigger.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, to me, it's just recognizing that intelligence does see the whole picture,
Yeah.
where from our personality self, it's like it's not, in my experience, it's not usually seeing the whole picture and like the best way for things to unfold, because I do feel that we're asking energetically, like we have desires, and we're launching those desires because it's something we feel we want to experience. And so that's, to me, like, is our part is energetically saying like, this feels good to me, I'd like to experience more of that. But then from our mind-made personality self, we don't see all the moving parts of the collective, like of the planet, because again,
Mhm.
you know and I've brought through information about this, that actually all of our desires are interrelated. So like my desires, perfectly connect to the puzzle people of, other people's desires. So if I want to do this and it's a collaboration, well, obviously there's other people that have something similar, and the greater intelligence knows how to line those pieces up,
Mhm.
seeing the whole picture, where from our personality self, we're just kind of like looking at whatever's in front of us.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I love that you're bringing forth like just, however it is that way for a reason. So rather like resist, the way it is, rather than push against the way it is. Just, to me, what's coming through is that trust of it is the way it is for a reason. and just remembering that however you connect to that greater intelligence, like it is moving pieces around for a reason. And so can we just let go of the, again, any shame, guilt, judgment, why is it this way type rhetoric to, okay, like this greater part of me is moving pieces around for a reason. And
Mm.
so does it feel better if I just say like, okay, like it is the way it is, and like let me just breathe and just chill and just accept and be here now.
Yeah, and I think what gets confusing sometimes is that there's a misperception that surrendering or accepting means that you are like stepping back into passivity and
Mhm.
you're no longer taking any action. You're kind of like, "Oh, give it to God. I'm just going to, smoke a joint and wait until my huge career is manifest," right? So it's like remembering that you can accept and surrender and trust and have faith in the process and be with what is, while also taking a stand for your desire and listening for guidance and
Mhm.
taking proactive aligned action towards what you desire. So it's holding that dichotomy, those two seemingly opposite things true at the same time, which I think that can be the tricky piece, right? Is that it's not a binary. It's like this it's this more complicated, nuanced experience.
Yeah, no, I love that. And what I found personally is that in the acceptance, the non-resistance, like it's where more of that intuitive guidance does flow through, like in
Mm,
the now moment. So like
totally.
if I'm not in resistance, and again, this is very talked about in like metaphysical realms, like if I'm not in resistance, I'm actually more available for that divine inspiration, like in
Yeah.
the moment, which actually is coming from that grander picture perspective, seeing how all the pieces could most smoothly move into place. And there's a lot of times where I don't know. So for instance, I'll bring up like perfect example. I like again, we connected over a music artist. You had posted something from Abel Hart in your story
Mm,
like a few months ago, and I had just discovered that artist like a week before,
mm,
and so I just bring up this example because sometimes when we don't even know how the inspiration is, we just think it's just something, I'll say like random for this example. Like I don't know why this just feels good in this moment. But I've learned to trust that. Like anything that feels divinely inspired, I'm like, I may not see where this is going, but it feels good. It feels right. So I'm gonna ride this wave.
yeah.
And because I saw that in your story, I was just like, oh, I wanna see what it is. And then I sent like a little comment to you. It's like, oh, I just discovered this person, like last week, and you were
Mhm.
like, yeah, I want to have him on my podcast, and that got us talking. And it's fun that once you like talk to someone on Facebook, I've been told the algorithm starts to show you posts of that person more. So once I had said hi, and you said hi back, I started seeing more of your posts. Like just Facebook search, and and now I'm like, oh, like I have a lot in common with this person. Then
Mhm.
I asked to talk to you. My next feel best step, and we had a chat, and you actually recommended really great resources for me that actually have played out in my life in really cool ways.
Mm.
And I love that example because that was not pre-planned. That was not, I'm looking for this thing to happen. I need this. It was just like, we are looking, we're like tuning into the same artist. That's cool. Like, let me say hi.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like following the breadcrumbs, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's helpful hearing you talk about this because sometimes I will judge myself, going back to judgment, self-judgment, and it's such the antithesis of how I'm saying that we can do this more effectively, but I'm still learning and still in my process. But I'll judge myself as not being as good at receiving intuitive guidance as other people that I admire, right? And so I'll feel like, oh, it's like not so clear the messages from my higher power, from my intuition. It's like so many people that I work with, that I'm receiving from usually, or that I'm interviewing on my podcast, for example, it seems like they have this direct, phone when they're able to like just get the very clear guidance. Whereas for me, sometimes I can struggle with discerning, is it my thought, is it my ego, is it guidance, what is it? And I'm still very much in that process of understanding how my intuition and my higher power speaks with me and through me. And following breadcrumbs is something that I feel pretty effective at. So I appreciate you using that as an example. And it is often, I agree, it comes from this like, oh, there's this little possibility that came up, and how does that possibility make me feel? And then, okay, it feels pretty good, so maybe I'm gonna like follow that possibility and then see what happens next. And it's really that shift from thoughts, from like trying to analyze it in our head and having these thoughts or emotions around it, to like the feeling, and
Yeah.
that's one of the pieces that I'm also cultivating more of, like how to discern thoughts and emotions versus feelings in order to better listen to my intuition.
Yeah, well, I love that you're doing that, and yeah, I feel it ties in perfectly to our theme because to me, this is the magic of just listening to that true self, as you were talking about at the beginning, like that really authentic true self. Because to me, I experience that true self in my heart, and that's
Mm,
where I feel my guidance come through, and the feelings you were talking about. And it's
mhm,
very simple, it's very simple. It's usually just like, "This lights me up," like,
mhm,
that's it. Like, there's, like, a spark of excitement. Again, my mind may not know why, but in this example, it was just like, "Oh, somebody else discovered that artist?" Like, "Oh, I just discovered that artist." Like, "That's cool."
mhm,
And I've just been in this, I've been in this phase where I just wanna, like, reach out more, I just wanna connect more, and
mhm,
so, I did look at your story, but I didn't stop there. I was like, "Well, let me just say hi, because like, we, apparently we're enjoying the same thing," so
yeah,
and so it's just that, like, like, burst of excitement was like, "Oh, I wanna connect with this person,"
mhm,
and then I started seeing more of your posts. It was like, "Oh, like, we actually see common," like, my next excitement was like, let's see if this person wants to have a chat. And then when I had the chat, like, you actually all these really helpful pieces you were able to offer for, things I'm on my path. And that was the moment where I was just like, oh, like, it makes sense talking right now. But in the beginning, it was just bursts of excitement. And it was like,
mm,
ooh, that feels good. That feels good. Like you said, it wasn't intellectual.
mhm,
It was just like, a pull, like, "Ooh, this is drawing me in, and now I wanna say this, and now I wanna say that," and then, again, 10 steps down the road, I'm like, "Oh, this is, like, so perfect." Like, this is how that
mhm,
this is how that true self guides to what's best for me. It's, like, just these
mhm.
impulses of, "Ooh," just drawing me in, or "That feels good?"
Yeah, these impulses of ooh, I like that. And there's like an openness that is the foundation for it, right? An openness almost to curiosity. It's not predetermining, like this is the outcome that I'm moving towards. It's just being open to possibility in that example. And I think that's really powerful and a powerful way to plug in. And then I also want to speak to the piece that you shared around connecting to our hearts as the path to connecting to the truth of who we are, because that really resonates for me. That's why the retreat that I offer in the world is called Awakened Hearts. It's all about connecting to our hearts. I have one coming up in May, and then another one in November, and I have chosen to focus on giving men and supporting GBTQ men to connect with their hearts because of that, because I find that is like the fastest, quickest, most effective access to the truth of who we are. It's almost like the truth of who we are, like, lives in this heart energy, this heart centered energy, which makes sense because it's love, which is what we are and which is what everything is. But it is more nuanced than that, because I feel like when we are able to tap into that heart space, we are going to find a unique a unique expression of our consciousness, right? So it's not that, I mean, ultimately we are all one, we are all in a sense love. So there is kind of a uniformity, or there is sort of like this blanket of truth, but then each of us holds a more specific, more unique expression of that. And that's the work that I get lit up about doing for myself and doing for others, is how can you get more and more familiar with that unique expression of your consciousness, or your unique expression of love and the expression of that love? How can you get more and more familiar with it, feel it, see it, understand it, know it, and then of course express it, right? And so the expressing part often requires some courage, and then the more that we express it, the more that we get it reflected back to us, the more that we get to know it and get familiar with it, and so it's
Yeah.
like these things support each other, and the more that we know it, the more free we feel to express it. So it's like it starts to like build upon itself.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I totally agree. Real quick, I just want to on what Roots said. I think Roots was referring to the difference between like that intuitive guidance and maybe more like the analyzing intellectual self, and he said it has a different feel.
Mm,
Yeah, and so yeah, I would agree. Yeah, it's just one is like pure feeling, and for me, and the other one is more like analytical. So
yeah,
I can
thanks.
totally
Thanks, Roots. Yeah. And
yeah.
I think that's, yeah, a big part of my growth edge right now, is really discerning which one is coming in, and figuring out what feels like this and what feels like that, and
Yeah.
asking myself, am I in my head, or am I in my heart, or am I in my body, or am I in some combination of all these things?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's yeah, it's the most important processing, if you ask me, is yeah, really that clarity and that discernment. So again,
Mhm.
love that you continue to lean in and just see what it's like for you. It's like, I mean, it's been the most profound thing for me and continues to be. Uh, and then I just wanted to tie back in what you were saying about that unique expression,
Mm,
because yeah, it's like, I feel like we hear this a lot, just whether it's like in a self-help community or metaphysics or, growth, that, like we are, this human expression is, essentially like a snowflake. Like I'm sure most of us have heard that like no two snowflakes have ever been identified as being the same. Like they're all, and so yeah, like this expression that we're currently having is one in, you know, it's the only one that ever will ever be like this. And so, and the way I see it is we're giving permissions. The way I look at it for me is like there's so much of my soul, authentic self, that wants to come through and shine, through these different aspects of creativity and
mm,
love and thoughtfulness and fun and play and, artistic expression, all these things. And it's just how much am I letting through, and where are the barriers that I may have absorbed throughout this life from conditioning or voices outside me that are saying like, no, I'm not going to let that through, more of that authentic expression through. And so
mhm.
that's what's been really meaningful for me, is to like, like see where the blocks are, again, not to
Yeah.
make them a problem, but like how does it feel to hold back, this expression, like, and do I want to keep, you know consciously holding back? Because once I'm aware of it, to me it's conscious. If it was unconscious, it's like kind of like a default, kind of like you said before, not really being seen. But once I can see the block, I'm like, okay, now it's conscious. Now I really have a choice
Mhm.
if I'm going to keep holding back in this way or not. Uh, and yeah, I mean, I'll give one example and then I'll just throw it back over to you. That I just love the real life examples because they're so powerful. Like
Yeah, no, so good.
I'll never forget, and this one it's just one of those ones that'll always be close to my heart. That
Mm,
uh, many years ago. So I've done my hair like this for since I was like 25. I got rid of it a few times because like I was like people pleasing and I had some fears. But
mm,
overall, it's been mostly like this for 25 years. And I had so much insecurity about like spiking it up
mm,
because I was just like, oh, people are going to judge me. They're going to think I'm this. They're going to think I'm that. And so I just kind of like had it for me mostly. Like when I was at home, I would spike it up and I was like, okay, this is for me. And I
mhm,
really wouldn't go out in the world. But people would ask me, they'd be like, oh, do you ever spike it up? And I was like, yeah, sometimes. I'll
Mhm.
never forget when it actually happened both ways. It happened like this down, but also when I started spiking up and going out in public,
Mm.
despite what my mind-made self thought would happen, like all this fear of judgment and like, oh, like, or like, who do you think you are? Like, why do you think you can have your hair like that? Any of that stuff.
Mm.
What actually I would get was people going, "Oh my gosh, I love your hair."
Mhm. Amazing.
Like, I walked into a restaurant once, I was meeting a friend, it was spiked up, and as this guy comes out, he just goes, "Man, I love your hair."
Mhm.
And I'll never forget, I was walking down a sidewalk in Los Angeles, walking down the sidewalk to a grocery store, and someone driving by, probably at like 45 miles an hour, rolled down their window and went, "I love your hair."
Amazing.
I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, this has all been in my head."
Sure.
So, it's like
And and there are probably people who do judge you for it too, and
mm,
that's okay. But I think that the reason that you get to receive all the admiration and these people who are like yelling out the window is because it's inspiring.
mm,
And it's a permission slip for them to be more expressive of their truth and their creativity and their uniqueness. And so even though there could be some people who are not as far along on the path of appreciating that, who see it as a threat because it makes them aware of their blockages
mm,
and what is keeping them from their full self-expression. So then they judge it as a result of that. That still is probably happening too. But then you get these people who are like, oh my God, self-expression, unique, creative, all that good stuff, that they are moved to shout out a window, right? And so it inspires both, you know? And it kind of makes me think back to this like trigger piece where it's like there's the blockage, there's like two accesses to our truths. It's like we can access our truth by like feeling into what wants to come out and what wants to explore and play. A good example of that is I love when I was the executive director of Easton Mountain, when I was living there, I would bring people into the drag closet, people who were like in their 70s, gay men who had never put on a dress, and they would like put on a little bit of drag and like tap into this femininity that they had never experienced before and start wanting to express that part of themselves, that part of their truth. And so it was almost like I was able to, coax it out of them by giving them that permission to play. But then the opposite side is like the triggers that are the blocks, right? And sometimes we aren't aware of what's behind the block. We just know that something is triggering us and we're up against some resistance. And so oftentimes our work to get closer to our truth is to seek the blocks, to figure out where the triggers are, and then once we remove the blocks, the truth inevitably starts coming through, right? Yeah, and it just to share my personal story, the femininity thing rings true with me as well. I mean, there was a time where I was really ashamed of my feminine expression. I had an ex-boyfriend break up with me because he told me that I was too feminine for him, and I put a lot of that in the closet, and I was afraid to be the flowy self that I know that I am, and to experiment with drag and to be creative in that world. And similarly, like when I've embraced it, that's when I receive the most celebration of who I am, because it's this pure expression of my truth, and that lights me up. And so in turn, it lights the people who receive me in that way up.
mm, mm. Yeah. Uh, yeah, what really stuck out for me was like, yeah, just kind of when the blocks become aware, when we can really see them, it's like, again, to me, that's where that conscious choosing is. Like, I know for me, it just doesn't feel like I feel it in my chest. Like, it feels like this energy wanting to move through, but I have like this shield where it's just like, no, I won't let you out. And that's what becomes so uncomfortable to me that I get to a point where I'm just like, kind of like you were said, like I surrender, like I can't hold back anymore.
Yeah.
It's like it's just too uncomfortable and it feels uh,
Mhm.
so unnatural. And so yeah,
Mhm.
just that awareness of like where we're kind of like buffering the energy, if you will, buffering the authenticity. Um, because yeah, just I mean, to me, every time it's been that true self, just like just wanting to purely express, and I like let it through. Like I feel more freedom, I feel more
Yeah.
bliss, I feel more joy, and it's
Mhm.
like because it's like letting that authentic snowflake, if you will, like really show all the intricacies of its different arms and edges and points, and it's like oh, it's
Mhm.
like now it's out there able to be expressed and seen and shared. Because I do feel that we have these unique selves to share. Because it's like, again, every authentic expression inspires another. Like I always think I always like watch my tendencies, and I find myself mostly when I'm on social media, like I'm really tempted to look at the stories of musicians, because I just see musicians like being themselves, dressing how they want, if they want to color their hair, like
Mhm.
and then so I'm drawn to that because I'm like, oh, like I just want to see people like expressing themselves naturally, and even on stages and in spotlights. So I just
Mhm.
notice I'm like, oh, like of all the things I could look at, I'm mostly drawn to people who I perceive as just like authentically expressing themselves. And so I'm like, well, that speaks volumes, because if I'm most interested in that, then like I
Yeah.
must also want to be that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that's why they're famous too, in some respects, right? Because they
Yeah,
have found that courage to express all of themselves in these unique ways. And so it is interesting and exciting for people because it helps
yeah,
them see that they can step into a fuller expression of themselves.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. Yeah, it's an inspiration, and that's why most
Mhm.
likely I'm drawn to it. But and then I also want to be more authentic myself. So yeah, I love that. Well, we're coming up on like
You
45
are
minutes. Oh, go ahead.
just to finish that thought. It's you're saying that it inspires you, and then you want to do it too. And I just want to reflect back that you are also a wayfinder. You are also a pillar of
Mm,
self-expression. You are a beacon of this stand for truth and expression of truth. And so it makes sense to me that you are listening to that call and following that call, because then in turn you are paving the way for others to
mm.
also have that experience and to get to know all the crystalline surfaces of their snowflake and find more courage to express it, to show those pieces.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, thank you for finishing that, because yeah, it's just reminding me of like the ripple effect. It's just like the ripple effect. Like one ripple bounces off another, bounces off another, bounces off another, and now it's like this whole tapestry that's like organizing itself.
And it's so much bigger than we can ever imagine too.
Yeah,
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 it's
I
so
totally
great.
agree.
Mhm.
Um, well, yeah, we're coming up on almost 45 minutes, so I just, we said we go about that long, so I'm just kind of curious, like any closing thoughts or sentiments you'd like to leave with people who are maybe like feeling this in some way or another within themselves, like, like I just know where I'm holding back and I'm just ready to break
Mhm.
free, like any words of wisdom you'd like to just share from your experience?
Yeah, I'm just struck by this thing you were sharing around how painful it feels when you
Mm,
do realize that you aren't fully expressing this truth and you are disconnected from this truth. And it is painful. And sadly, I think a lot of people aren't even aware of that pain because it's become so normalized to move through this world in denial of our truth and in
mm,
denial of the possibility of expressing that truth. And so it's like once you start to see that, you can't unsee it. And once you start to move into that, you are on the path. And so anything less than that, yes, feels painful. And so, and I would say the flip side of that is when it's happening, there's so much joy and so much love. That's kind of why it feels painful when you're outside of it. And so, yeah, I would say like if there's any inkling or any curiosity of what else this life has in store for you, to follow the breadcrumbs and see what's on the other side. See if there are pieces of you that you haven't been able to find and become familiar with, that are wanting to move past the blockages and move into the light, and to be able to express and be shared in this world, because that's the joy of living, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I just what came to mind was like a metaphor that I feel like I've seen recently where it's like something saying, that like a flower is just a flower. It's like it's not telling a tree how to be a tree. It's like the
Mm,
flower is just being the flower. And so,
yeah,
and yeah, it is that big tapestry. I feel like the reason that so many of us appreciate nature is because in nature, I mean, which we are a part of, I'm not going to separate
yeah,
us from that. But, over the years, we've kind of like been led to believe that we're something other. I'm just talking about when we go into like a natural setting, one of the reasons it's so striking is because like everything in that environment is just being itself, like
totally.
the butterflies being the butterfly, the lily pads being the lily pad, and like when you look at it all together, it's just like this is cool.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, speaking of like finding inspiration in artists, the greatest artist perhaps is our creator, you
Yeah.
know? And so
Yeah.
we get to see what has been created in its natural expression of truth. So there is inspiration in every plant and every flower, of
Yeah.
like this really tapping into the truth of who we are. And it's epic and beautiful and more powerful and more epic than we can ever imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And this is one of the things, just another piece is coming in that just feels like a really nice thing to add here before we kind of wrap up is that when I'm reflecting at the places I know I'm still holding my back, like consciously, I'll sometimes ask myself the question, like, what if Beyonce held back on herself? Like, like, what if Beyonce or, like a Katy Perry,
Sure.
like, what if they sat there and they're like, nope, I have all of this creativity, all of this music, all of these concerts that want to move through me. And you know what? Nope, I'm just going to buffer it and like keep it right here. And like, and so like that helps me just remember like, yeah, just the beauty of allowing the authentic, because I'm like, well, I'm so glad that there's so many times like I'm not going to say that I've listened to everything that Beyonce's ever created and maybe I don't like every song, but there's been a handful of them where it's just like at a certain point in my life that song was really like crucial for me, and and so it's just another way I reflect and like, do I want to be the person that like holds back something that may really feel good for me to let move through, but then also by it being out there it may really do something for someone else, at a moment in their journey. So that's just another little tool that
That,
I,
it's that's why it's so important that we do connect with our truth and learn how to, or allow ourselves to fully express it, is because when we're not doing that, we're denying the world of our gifts.
yeah, exactly.
And so yeah, it's like Beyonce. I love those artists, and we can also say, you know, we can also say Gandhi. We can say Martin Luther King
Yeah,
Jr. That the world is able to change because people are offering their gifts. And my belief is that if more of the world was able to really tap into their truth and fully express their truth, we would live in perfect harmony. That
yeah,
that is the key to shifting all the chaos and destruction and the negative aspects of this society. If we were able to change that on a massive scale, this would be such a different world.
yeah, yeah. I mean, just what I've found is that through my experience, like when because I've found just like really amazing levels of peace with myself. There's still parts where again I see I'm holding back, but overall, like I've just come to such levels of peace within myself, and
Mm,
I also asked this in meditation many years back. I said, to all that is, I said, when will the world know peace? And
mm,
like, 30 minutes into that meditation, I just heard in my heart that the world will know peace when every single being has, found peace within themselves.
mhm,
And years later, because that was a number like 7 years ago now, like it's like when the more I'm at peace with myself and just really being myself, like there's nothing in me that wants to like control anybody else or tell anyone else who to be,
mm,
or even how to live their lives. Like I may have wisdom that if people are like, "Do you have any wisdom you want to share?" I'm like,
mm,
"Sure," but ultimately, even with the wisdom, I'm like, I always encourage people, but listen to the inside of you above all else. So,
mm,
so yeah, just to speak to your example, it's like the more that I allow that authentic self just to be, like, there's no part of me that wants to like, just like, I just want to love all of this, like love all of this and just watch it be what it is. So
mm.
yeah, it just gets simpler. As I'm just adding to what you're saying to me, it gets simpler, and it's just like, yeah, let's just let everything be what it's meant to be.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining
Uh,
me for this conversation. It's been beautiful. It feels like we could go like for like up to three
I
hours
know.
if we wanted to.
We'll do it again. We'll do it. We're gonna do it on my podcast too. So, yeah,
Oh,
it's
amazing.
fun.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you again. And again, if you've enjoyed what Will brought through today, you can find his website in the description. And after we sign off, I'll go ahead and tag him in it as well if you want to check out his Facebook. So thank you, everyone. We're just kind of sharing where we're at, what we've witnessed along the way in our journey. So if this helps you and speaks to you, feel free to leave a comment on the replay. And until next time, thanks again, Will, and much love, everyone.
Much love.